Hello and welcome everyone. This is Binam, and in this video I am going to talk about behavioral finance. This is my second lecture on this topic. You may recall in the first lecture, in the introductory lecture on behavioral finance, we covered a number of concepts including the important theory developed by Daniel Kahneman known as prospect theory. We also used some illustration from Daniel Kahneman publication known as Thinking Fast and Slow. So we took example of this photo here where we can see the lady, and we were able to quickly understand that the lady is angry, whereas when we talked about this multiplication problem, we understood that we can answer the question, but it will take time because we are processing the product of 17 times 24. So basically we're talking about the way our brain functions. System 1, it will be fast in terms of reaction. System 2, slower, deliberate, because we are making effort here in this computation. So this is more of an analytical in nature. And we also talked about different information processing error and some behavioral biases. So in this video now, we will continue those discussions. Basically, the learning objectives are as follows. So we want to understand if people are rational, and we also want to be able to judge if you are rational and your friend is a rational person. And in order to answer these questions, what we will be doing, we will be covering a number of biases, optical illusions, and we will also look upon bubbles, herd, and crashes. Basically, what we want to understand here is there is a growing recognition within the subject area of behavioral finance, mainly because it captures both psychology and finance together. So we want to understand and examine how rational we think we are and how rational we can be. So with that in mind, let us now begin. And firstly, I will be showing you some photos. The way I want you to study this video is when you see the photo, pause the video, such as when you have seen this photo, pause the video, think about what you can see in the picture, and play the video again. So, this is basically a well-known optical illusion. Now, this is interesting because such illusion can be the result of the way we are built, the way our brain functions. The key here is that we are not consciously aware of these functions and biases. So basically, these illusions are the results of the way our brains function, the way that we process information. So in this example, what can you see? You should see a girl, a young girl, or you should see a lady, an old lady. You may have seen the girl who is pretty, Or you may have seen a lady who is old and rather ugly. And there is nothing wrong. Those of you who haven't seen the girl yet, then you see this is the nose, this is the chin, and this is the ear. Those of you who haven't seen the lady, this is the mouth. I'm pointing using the mouse. This is the mouth, this is the chin, and this is the eye. So you should be now able to see the girl and separately the old lady. Next, this time I want you to count. So tell me the number of dark spots that you can see in this photo. So I want you to count how many dark spots can you see in this photo. Now, this is called Hermann grid illusion. This is one form of biological illusion. When we see this photo, behind our eyes we have receptive fields. So the retina is there. The receptive fields of the retina compete with one another to become active. Hence, what we see here is both the dark and the light spots as they move. But in fact, there is no dark spot at all. And if you want to confirm, what you need to do, let's say when you are here, I'm pointing my mouse. When you are here, if you focus here, you will just see that there is no dark spot. Move here. When you move along here, again pay focus just to this point, you will see there is no dark spot. So this is just a biological illusion that we see dark spots, and I just told you the reason, because the receptive fields of the retina is competing with one another to become active, but in fact there are no dark spots. Next, I have this picture, and the question is, which line, the one on the top or the one on the bottom, which line is longer? The answer is they are of the same size. It is just the arrows that are given in that are produced differently in these two lines that makes us feel that perhaps the one on the top has longer line as compared to the one in the bottom, but in fact they are the same size. Next, I have this photo, and I want you to pause the video and think, what do you see in the picture? Play the video again. This is called Rubens Vaz. And what happens is you can see either two faces, that's the nose, here is the lips, and that is the chin. Two faces is what you can see, or you may be seeing the pot to keep the flower, the vase here. It is difficult to see both the vase and the face together. So what is it? This is Rubens Vaz. This deals with visual perception. The brain usually classifies images by which object surrounds which. Where this is not clear, it creates contradictions that the brain cannot manage. So we are able to see another illusion here. Next, I have this to show you, and the question is, how many triangles can you see in this photo? I want you to count them. Maybe you want to pause the video, count them, and play the video again. This is called Kanitsas triangles. You may say there are 8 triangles because that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the big white 7, the big triangle with black border 8, or maybe lower than 8 you may have discovered. But in fact, there is no triangle at all. What is happening is we tend to ignore gaps. That's what we are doing, or we are completing these lines ourselves in our mind when we are counting the number of triangles. But you see, these shapes here are helping our brain to assume that there is a triangle here. But in fact, there are no triangles at all. It is our mind that is filling in these lines and creating the triangles. Next, I have this particular exercise, and what I want you to do is I want you to type in YouTube selective attention test. So if you type in YouTube selective attention test, or maybe you also want to type count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball, you should be able to find the video. Okay, if you struggle, I'll put a link underneath, and therefore you'll be able to find this video. This is an interesting exercise, and what you will find is, if you pay attention to count the number of times people wearing white pass the basketball, if you concentrate, you may not see the gorilla. However, play the video in YouTube again and you will see that there is a gorilla appearing after 23rd seconds, and the gorilla is there for roughly around 10 seconds. So between 23 seconds to 32 seconds, the gorilla is there. So basically, we saw some of these optical illusions, and that way we are able to say that our brain allows us to think things differently, and therefore it can lead to develop some biases. Now what we want to do is look into some cognitive biases. So basically, cognitive bias is related to how we think or perceive about something. It's about the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, through experience, that sort of thing is included within cognitive bias. In plain language, it is about the way we understand and process information, the way we perceive or conceptualize some information. And we are also subject to such biases because of the way that we think and process information. So now we want to see some of those cognitive biases. And first thing I have to show you is this picture of disaster. You can see there are dead bodies here on the black bags, and then you can see the destruction that has taken place. Where did this happen? This happened in the Philippines, and this is the result of the Typhoon Haiyan. And these photos are from 2013 when the typhoon took place. That was on November the 8th, 2013. And you know very well that recently, this year in 2020, there was another typhoon. And you see the geography, the way where Philippines is located, and so many small islands, and ocean all around. And you may have heard so many news about typhoons in Philippines in the past. Next, I want to show you another case of disaster, but this time it is in Nepal. That was in 2015, and when you will click this news and see, or simply type in Nepal 2015 earthquakes facts, you will find that about 10,000 people lost their lives. And you can also find information says, why is Nepal prone to earthquakes? Because of the plates underneath the earth, and these we can simply type this in Google. Why is Nepal prone to earthquakes? So let me type in, because I just before I had typed that in, I was able to see some information very relevant. Why is Nepal prone to earthquakes? So you can see here it is giving you some useful information. Nepal is particularly prone to earthquakes. It sits on the boundary of two massive tectonic plates. It is the collision of these plates that has produced the mountains, and with them also the earthquakes. So with this information now, and you may be aware that so many aftershocks, thousands of them, took place after this earthquake in 2015, and many earthquakes also. So now I have this question for you. You saw the case of the typhoon in the Philippines, and I also talked about the earthquake in Nepal. So the earthquake in Nepal took place in 2015. This typhoon in Philippines took place in 2013. Now my question to you is, question number 1. I've got two questions, one related to typhoon in Philippines and the other earthquake in Nepal. So the first question, when do you think prior to 2013 the typhoon of this nature took place in Philippines? Another question related to Nepal. When do you think before 2015 the earthquake causing such loss of life and wealth took place in Nepal? You may like to pause the video, think of the answer, and play the video again. So the answer to this question is, prior to 2013, it was in 1991. So that's around 1991 to 2020 now would be 20 years and 9, almost 30 years. Yeah, not now. So 2013 and 2000 and 1991. So that's 9 years, 22 years ago. So 22 years before 2013, Philippines experienced a strong typhoon similar to this in terms of magnitude. In the case of Nepal, if you click this link, you'll find that an earthquake of this size and nature took place about 80 years ago. So when I gave you the information about the Philippines, and I also told you the recent news in 2020, and that there was this typhoon, you may have thought that Philippines is prone to typhoon and typhoon is happening every now and then, but the typhoon of this category, category 5 storm, in fact happened 22 years before 2013. And in the case of Nepal, something like this happened about 80 years ago. So this basically means if you had established an answer that was not too long ago, then, and this would be the answer that will be given by many people because of the way the information was given to you. You will say in your answer that the typhoon took place not a long time ago. The earthquake prior to 2015 took place not a long time ago, but in fact it took place more than 8 decades ago. And these are telling you some information, and I will talk about that after another example. So here is the photo, and some of you may already know this picture belongs to Phil Hughes, who unfortunately passed away because his upper part of the neck was hit by the ball while playing cricket in Australia. Now, you may know the ball of a cricket. It is very hard. And the question to you now is, how many people you think may have died as a result of hitting by a ball while playing cricket? So what is your answer? So now, given I also gave you the information that the ball is very hard, which you may already know, and in a test match, you need to bowl so many times, so you know that the ball is used by the bowler and the batsman. So you may come to conclusion that perhaps many people may have died as a result of being hit by the ball while playing the cricket. But the reality is, over the course of 150 years, so in the past 150 years, only 8 people have died as a result of being hit by the ball. So the 3 examples I gave you are basically to help you understand what is known as available heuristic. So what does that mean, available heuristic? Available heuristic is basically means people tend to heavily weigh their judgments toward more recent information or toward a dramatic event or a personal experience which may have made a difference or have impacted you intensely. Okay, and therefore what you will be doing is you will be making decision, because your decision will be influenced by such seminal event or recent or dramatic event or a personal experience which impacted you a lot. And therefore the way I portrayed this information, you may have given answers which were far away from the real answers. So that is related to available heuristic. Basically, you are confirming an answer based on these facts because they are what you knew, and therefore and they were important for you because they were recent, so they are in your memory, or they were motivated from a personal experience which impacted you a lot, or a salient event. Okay, and this is something I have taken from Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, Available Heuristic, but these examples I just made to help you understand. Next, I want to show you this picture, and you understand this is about you when you graduate. How much salary should you be expecting? So I want you to think of how much salary on average the graduates they earn. So basically, you may want to find out this information, and you may have seen this information in the past. So if you were to find information about the average graduate salary from let's say sources such as this one, the graduate market 2019 median starting salary £30,000. So this is according to the report. Okay, and if you see the prospectus.ac.uk, the salary is for a graduate is between £23,000 to £28,000, and you may have access to some other source, and the other source may give a different salary. So in between these two, there is already a difference of let's take the average here, which will be 25,000. Here is 30,000, so £5,000 difference, which is a huge difference. But if you had access and if you had read just this set of information, then you will say this is the correct salary for a graduate. If you had access to this second source of information from prospectus.ac.uk, then you would say, let's say 25,000. So this basically means your answer can be different from the answer given by another who has seen the graduate salary from a different source. But then you are confirming something from your side, and you're saying this 30,000 should be the salary, and that's what you are confirming, and therefore that is known as confirmation bias. So basically, in the case of confirmation bias, what you are doing is you are supporting your own prior knowledge, beliefs, or values. So you have a tendency, people will have a tendency to support their own prior knowledge, belief, or values, and that is known as, and that way people will confirm the information. That is known as confirmation bias. So again, in a confirmation bias, we have, or people have, the tendency to search for or to interpret or recall information in a way that conforms their prior beliefs or values, and therefore people would be subject to bias. And this is again taken from Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. Next, I have this example, and you all can see this is about September 11 attack, Twin Tower attack, and so many people died. Now, I have also given you this set of information here, which is saying to you on July 10th, 2001, the CIA obtained information that Al-Qaeda might be planning a major attack on the USA. Now, do you think, this is my question, do you think that this information should have been passed to the president? Okay, that is the question. So, if the information was passed on to the president, do you then think that the attack could have been avoided? So pause the video, think about the answer, and play the video again. So basically, this is known as hindsight bias, also known as recall bias. Okay? So basically, in this type of bias, you understand the situation or event only after it has happened or only after it has developed. So as the name suggests, hindsight basically means remembrance or perception, or in simple term, it is I knew it all along. So basically what you're saying is, if the President of the United States was given this information in advance when this was known to CIA, then maybe the President would have been able to avoid such an attack. But when are you saying this? You are saying this only after the event has happened. Okay? So now, looking into this bias, here is a question. How do you think this might affect the way we view risk takers in financial institutions? So, as an example, what you can say here is you can think about the rogue traders, such as, let me find out the news of the rogue traders. So I had seen it before. Rogue trader. What is the name? Society in general. Yeah, that is Jerome Carvale, and this is the loss. What was significantly high. One of the highest loss caused. Luckily, Society General, the bank, had adequate capital to absorb that loss. But then here, let's see the photo. Yeah, that's the trader, the rogue trader. Okay, of course, was prisoned. But now, looking into this question, what you can say is, traders should not have been allowed to trade without authorization. Yeah. If only traders were allowed to trade with authorization, then such loss would not have taken place, or such unauthorized trading would not have happened. So that's kind of an example for hindsight bias. Next, I have something else for you to think about. How good driver you think you are, or how good looking you are, or how honest you are. Okay, so questions such as, who thinks that they are in the bottom 25% in terms of honesty? Maybe you all think that you are honest, but there will be people, if I'm talking about, 100 people attending a particular conference, and obviously if we are asking questions in an appropriate manner, then some would be more honest than some others. So therefore we will be able to so that's something uh, um, correct to say, that some people are honest, some people are less honest. But we all think that we are honest, don't we? Most of us, yeah. And then in terms of good looking, again, we all think positively, we all like ourselves. Therefore, when we talk about driving ability, there was a famous survey in Sweden or Switzerland, I forgot where it was, but in that famous survey, what was found is 90% of the drivers, they said they were better than the average. So how can that how is that possible mathematically? That's not possible. 90% of the drivers cannot be better than the average drivers, yeah. So but we tend to think positively. We are more optimistic, and this, if this is what we are exhibiting, then that is called optimism bias. And as a result, what we may do is we may buy a stock because we think the price earning ratio of that particular stock is very high, and therefore with the optimism bias, we may be happy to pay a higher price for that stock, although the fundamental value of the stock can be much lower than the one in the market. So that's basically optimism bias. Next I have is this photo to share to you, and as you can see in this photo, this is here Charlie Chaplin, the famous comedian, and next to him is Mahatma Gandhi. And here you can see another photo of Mahatma Gandhi. And if you want to access this news, you just need to click here, or you can type Mahatma Gandhi's 164-year-old school in Rajkot is now a museum. Now my question to you is Gandhi lived very long and he died at the age of 144. My question to you is this statement correct, which is Gandhi lived very long, he died at the age of 144? Is that statement correct? Okay. The second question is, what do you think is the real age of Gandhi when he passed away? Pause the video, think of the answer, play the video again. Now, what is in your mind? You see, I gave you some background information, including about the school, 164 year. I also showed you a photo in which, compared to Charlie Chaplin, he is of course old, but in the photo is looking very old, also in this photo. Now, I also asked you in the statement, I told you he died at the age of 144. Do you believe? So with all this information, you may have thought of Mahatma Gandhi as Gandhi's age at his death somewhere closer to, let's say, 100 years. Okay, but the reality is he passed away at the age of 78. So basically, I gave you this information as a reference point. And if you took the information I shared as a reference point, such as this 164, then you may make mistake, and therefore you may predict that you may say that when Gandhi died he was, let's say, 90 years old or 105 years old, but in reality he passed away when he was 78 years old. Now this relates, when I said to you about the reference point, then this relates to another bias in my discussion called anchoring bias. So basically, this is a bias used in psychology to describe the common human tendency to rely too heavily on a piece of information while making decision. And in this case, the information was the reference that I was making, such as 164-year-old school in India now is a museum. Okay. Another example could be, for example, when you are negotiating price of your accommodation, price of your room or price of your flat. And if you are already aware how much your friend is paying for a flat in the same city, then prices discussed in negotiations that are lower than the reference price in your mind, then it may seem reasonable, the price that is negotiated, because you will find it lower than the reference price. But it may be the case that the price that you have been asked to pay is in fact higher than the average rent of similar flat. But you just had that reference point, which was how much your friend was paying. Your friend may have been paying a higher price, but because that you had that as your reference, when you were negotiating the price for your flat, and if the price offered was lower than what your friend was paying in the same city, you will be happy to take the accommodation, to agree the price, because you are relying on the reference. And that's basically anchoring bias. Okay. Because you are relying too heavily on the piece of information which you are aware of. Okay, so that's basically anchoring bias. So what we have seen here is okay, here again, listen, here as an example, how do you think this might affect the way we want to make a decision in relation to, say, buying a stock? So if you had something in your mind about the stock price of a particular company, and if the price in the share market is lower than what you had as a reference price, then you will be tempted to buy the stock, although it can be the case that the fundamental value of that stock is much more lower than the one in the market, and that way you will be subject to anchoring bias and you will be making a mistake. So what we have done so far is we've seen some cognitive biases, and we saw anchoring bias, we saw optimism bias, we saw hindsight bias, and we saw confirmation bias, and we also saw available heuristic here. Okay, and there are so many other biases that you will be able to find in textbooks and through reading online, but given the time constraints, we will limit our discussion on the cognitive biases with these ones that we just discussed, but let me assure you that these are some of the widely discussed biases in relation to the irrationalities that people display in the case of stock market or financial security market. Next, we want to see some thing called herd behavior. Okay, and you can see from the photo here that it is giving you the meaning. The photo itself is making the meaning clear, but basically in the case of herd behavior, what you do is you take actions because other people have already taken similar actions. So this behavior shows how individuals, how people in a group can act together without planned direction. And such behavior also causes noise in the market, and I have this picture to show you regarding the noise. So basically the herd behavior pertains, or the herd behavior is related to the behavior of animals in herds, flocks, and we see similar behavior among people during activities such as stock market bubbles or stock market crashes. So what people do is during the bubbles, everyone is buying. During the crashes, everyone they would like to sell, and this type of behavior therefore is common in the stock market as well. And one really good example is the stock market crash of 1987, and I also discussed about this in my introductory lecture on behavioral finance, that Dow Jones Industrial Average lost its price, and in a single day the loss of 26% that was recorded for Dow Jones Industrial Average is so far the highest drop. But what is the cause of this market crash of 1987, also known as Black Monday of 19th October 1987? There is no the traditional finance is not able to find the answer. When Robert Siller conducted the research, sending out questionnaire, he found that the explanation for this crash was given by the psychological factor, not by the rational side of the argument. So therefore we see the herd behavior in the case of that stock market crash in 1990. Of course, this was repeated again in the bubble of internet bubble 2001. So basically, just on the mechanism of herd behavior, what happens is explained here, and these are some important articles. Basically, it may be the case that the informed or the rational investors will make the decision first, such as buy the stock, and then less informed will wait to see what others will do. But then what happens is the information about the fact that some people have started buying or selling, the security will pass. This information will pass hands, will cascades, and that will give self-fulfilling reinforcement of the initial action, i.e. what was done by more informed people was the correct action, is the correct action. Therefore, with that, other people will also follow, and therefore a large number of people will be taking similar actions. And that's another paper discussing on the same issue, an interesting one. So that's about the herd behavior and the way information passes from one to another, reinforcing the initial action. But then something like this can also be seen in the case of butterfly economics. Basically, the author Paul Omerod discusses about human behavior which is similar to that of insects, and therefore the author says that people will also establish trend like that of ants. So ant is given as an example, wherein Paul Omerod Ormerod says studies of ant feeding behavior. They actively seek the opinion of other ants when searching for food. So what ants does is they actively seek the opinion of other ants when searching for food, and they don't just rely on their own efforts but follow the trails left by other ants. So what happens then is this creates a positive feedback mechanism and has the effect of creating a trend. So using the behavior of insects such as ants, Paul Paul Ormerod explains that such behavior can also be seen among humans. So that's why it is similar to herd behavior. But remember, in case of butterfly economics, it can lead to positive feedback mechanism as well. Whereas in the case of herd behavior, generally we are talking about making mistakes through the way information cascades, giving a self-fulfilling reinforcement of the initial action. But what also happens because of the herd behavior is it will lead to risk-seeking behavior in the extreme gain situation and risk-averse behavior in the extreme loss situation. So you see, these are therefore important consequences of the herd behavior. Now with all these, what we can do is we can look into the noise side, which can be, as an example, the outcome of such a herd behavior. So people are collectively talking about sell on the top picture here, and that's how the noise is being created. And in the picture bottom, they all here people are talking about buy and buy. So purchase decision here. Yeah. So these are about the noise, which can also be the result of the type of behavior that we discussed, including the herd behavior. Next, when we now have understood the herd behavior, we also looked upon butterfly economics, and and we also saw the consequences in terms of the noise. Now we want to see the bubbles, and this is interesting. And here we're just saying that the price of tulip bulbs were as expensive as the price of a luxury house in the Netherlands back in that time, 1634 to 1637. And if you want to find this piece of reading, you can simply type in Google "was tulipmania irrational economist 2013" and you will be able to obtain it for your reading. But you see, a flower bulb was being sold for the price of a luxury house in the Netherlands. So this is interesting, and this is therefore a good starting example to discuss bubbles. But now we want to see the mechanism of bubbles, for which I have this diagram for you to illustrate. Here you can see that this is the market price of a security, and this is the fundamental value. Here you don't see any problem, but the second diagram here, when many traders are selling, what will happen in the end? The crash cannot be avoided, such as the case of 2001 internet bubble crash. So what is happening here is too many peoples are there for sellings, and sufficiently many traders sell, and eventually what will happen? The price will crash, the market will crash, and therefore the bubble will not exist after that point. So that was just on the mechanism very quickly related to the bubbles. Of course, there are many examples of bubbles in stock market, in financial security market, and one of them is the 2001 internet bubble. Next, I have to tell you is about the Kinesian approach. So here, just wanted to highlight the way John Maynard Keynes talked about the financial markets. He made this point that the financial markets are like beauty contest. It's not the most beautiful contestants that necessarily wins, but the contestant everyone else thinks is the most beautiful. And this is central to markets. So what this basically means? This basically means we may be pricing stock, we may be pricing a bond, we may be pricing a financial security not based on what the fundamental is saying, not based on what the financial statements are saying, not based on what the expected future earning derived in present value term is saying, but we are pricing stock based on what everyone else in the market is saying. So we are not looking into these fundamentals, we are looking into the price set by the market participants. So therefore it is similar to the Keynes, John Maynard Keynes beauty contest, which is saying not the most beautiful contestant wins, but the contestant everyone else thinks is the most beautiful. So that's an interesting one, therefore I have kept it here. And in the end, as a final word, this is what I have to say to you, which is markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. So this was rather a quick discussion related to some behavioral biases, wherein you also saw the example of some optical illusions, cognitive biases, and we also briefly touched upon herd behavior, butterfly economics, and bubbles, including the mechanism of the bubbles and crashes. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for listening me.